would like to introduce, and Mats, thank you so much for coming.
And first of all, thank you for inviting me. My name is Mats Andersson. As was mentioned, I was CEO of AP4 up until mid-July last year. And now I'm spending a lot of time being the Vice Chairman of Global Challenges Foundation, a foundation that is supporting a mandatory program on global catastrophic risks here at Handelshögskolan, which we're proud sponsors of. I would like to share with you a bit on the journey we did at AP4 in terms of mitigating climate risk as a long-term investor. And then I would like to finish off with a few thoughts on why I believe and I know Sweden is in the forefront of sustainability and why companies are taking this in a commercial approach, a way forward. At AP4, by law, we're supposed to invest on a 30 to 40 year horizon, which I read in the law book when I came to AP4. I thought that was impossible. I thought it was okay to give up returns if you want to be the good citizen. I've come to the conclusion these days that that's not the right way to approach this. The right way is to actually understand that mitigating risks is a way to lower the risk and to enhance your returns, especially when it comes to climate change. And climate change was brought to my agenda by Laszlo Szombatfalvi, the founder of the foundation, Global Challenges Foundation, who kept asking me in 2009 and 2010 about how I defined risk at AP4, and it was pretty obvious to me it was all pending on volatility or based on volatility. However, he kept on asking me and pestering me on questions and said, is that really a risk? And I did rethink and came to the conclusion risk, in my view, is the risk of a permanent capital loss. Volatility has never killed a pension fund, especially not a pension fund that doesn't have a solvency capital like AP4. So then he kept asking me, how do you mitigate climate change? And I said to Laszlo, I don't even know if climate change represents a risk. And then he sent me articles, books, and I came to the point where I said, I think that, and I know that climate change is a risk. And I think we as a long-term investor should try to mitigate that. And instead of inventing the wheel, I went to see 10 of the world's 20 largest pension funds, and I asked them about risk. And they were all telling me the same story about volatility and volatility-based measures. And then I asked them, what about your exposure to climate change? It was as silent as it is now. Nobody had a clue, and this is 5 years ago. So I had to go back to the office and I spoke to the head of equities and said, no, Mats, it's impossible. We can't mitigate climate change and it's impossible, more or less. So I asked a young, newly hired guy from the university to look into this. And after a year, he came up with the idea to actually lower the carbon footprint in our equity portfolio by taking out the worst polluters in every sector. And by doing that, we got more or less historically the same returns, but we lowered the carbon footprint by 50%. And this strategy worked out pretty well. So after 5 years, we were able to actually enhance our returns by 250 basis points, and at the same time lower the carbon footprint in the entire equity portfolio by 30%. i.e. there is no conflict between sustainability and good returns. It's the other way around. If you do this the proper way, it's a way to actually enhance your returns and mitigate a risk. And I'm proud to say that after that we were able we're one of 4 founders of a coalition, PDC, that tried to find the doers among pension funds. And at the climate meeting 2015 in Paris, we were able to declare that we were 30 members, controlling 3.2 trillion US, and the management out of 600 billion were put in some kind earmarked for lowering the climate impact in the way you invested. And this was unheard of at that point. And I'm glad to say that even 2 years down the road again, I think that every of the 20 largest pension funds today know that climate change represents a risk that they one way or the other need to mitigate. And I'm sure that those pension funds have tried to mitigate this risk, done something about it, today can realize that it actually has been a driver for returns. Then you can ask, why is Sweden in the forefront in terms of sustainability? And I think the most important reason is all about to do with governance. We know that sustainability is defined as E, S, and G. And if you go back 15 years, it all started with a G. The problem at 15 years ago, they didn't know how to deal with the G, so they put it at the end of these 3 letters instead. But everything starts with governance and ends with governance, because governance actually represents the toolbox you can use if you want to have an impact as an owner or an investor. And if you look around the world on different governance models, we know that the Swedish model we have is very much owner-driven. It's the owners that represents in a nomination committee. You have a very transparent process when you elect people for the board. You don't have the management on the board except for maybe the CEO. This is a very different model if you compare it to US, where in my view, companies are actually being hijacked by management. They elect themselves, they evaluate themselves, and they remunerate themselves. And I think that's a much poorer model. So, sorry, and here we have the different models. So again, I think that governance matters. And I was at the conference in Tokyo some 6 years ago, and I spoke about the Swedish governance model, and the guy came up from me from a university in South Korea, and he said, interesting way that you deal with governance in Sweden. Do you know the owner structure in Samsung? I said, I haven't got a clue. So of course, do we know what we own? Samsung might be a good company, but actually we don't know what we own. So I think that the Swedish way to do it is a better way, and the proof is in the pudding. And my view is this is the outperformance of the Swedish market rolling 10 years. It's been between 500 and 700 basis points per annum, which academically is impossible. In reality, been a great driver for returns for us at AP4. And I prefer to have the Swedish toolbox in terms of governance compared to the US one, and especially to the South Korean one. So again, dealing with sustainability is a driver for good returns. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mats.